Have you ever noticed how the Assassin's Creed series has changed its approach to storytelling over the years? In the early games, it was all about the protagonist's personal journey, but now, it's the historical setting that takes center stage. What drove this shift, and how has it impacted the way we experience these games? From the days of Altair and Ezio to the more recent adventures of Bayek, Cassandra, and Eivor, the Assassin's Creed franchise has undergone a significant transformation in its narrative focus. The early titles, like Assassin's Creed II and Brotherhood, crafted rich, character-driven stories that molded history to fit the protagonist's personal arc. These games provided deep, emotional journeys as we watched Ezio grow from a vengeful young nobleman to a wise mentor of the Brotherhood. However, starting with Unity and Syndicate, the series began to shift towards a more history-centric approach. This transition became even more pronounced in the newer titles like Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, where the meticulously recreated historical settings and themes took precedence over the character's personal story. While still featuring compelling protagonists, these games prioritized immersing players in the culture, politics, and daily life of the time period. So, what does this mean for fans of the series, both old and new? Understanding this evolution in storytelling is crucial for appreciating the unique experiences each era of Assassin's Creed games offers. Whether you prefer the deeply personal tales of the early titles or the grand historical epics of the newer games, grasping the shift in narrative focus can enhance your enjoyment and provide a fresh perspective on the franchise's progression. But let's rewind for a moment and dive into the golden age of character-driven narratives that defined the early Assassin's Creed titles. These games crafted deeply personal stories that put the protagonist's journey front and center. Take Ezio Auditore, the iconic hero of Assassin's Creed II. His tale of revenge and redemption was the beating heart of the game. We watched as he transformed from a brash young nobleman seeking vengeance for his family's murder into a wise mentor of the Assassin Brotherhood. Every step of his journey, from his early days in Florence to his final confrontation with Rodrigo Borgia, was steeped in personal stakes and emotional weight. The historical backdrop of Renaissance Italy certainly added depth and richness to Ezio's story, but it never overshadowed his personal arc. The game masterfully molded the historical context to fit Ezio's narrative, creating a seamless blend of fact and fiction that kept us invested in his journey. Even as we explored the grand cities of Florence, Venice, and Rome, it was Ezio's relationships, his losses, and his growth that kept us hooked. The same can be said for Altair ibn Lahad, the protagonist of the original Assassin's Creed. His journey was one of redemption and self-discovery, as he learned to question the dogmatic teachings of his assassin order and seek a higher truth. The historical setting of the Third Crusade provided a fascinating backdrop, but it was Altair's personal struggle that drove the narrative forward. These early games used a variety of narrative techniques to keep the focus on the protagonist's story. Cutscenes and dialogue were carefully crafted to reveal the character's inner thoughts and motivations. Side quests and collectibles often tied back into the main narrative, providing additional insights into the protagonist's past or relationships. Even the gameplay mechanics, such as the synchronization system in Assassin's Creed II, served to reinforce the idea that we were experiencing Ezio's memories, his personal journey. By molding the historical context to fit the character's arc, these early Assassin's Creed games achieved a powerful emotional resonance. We weren't just playing through a series of historical events, we were experiencing a deeply personal story of love, loss, revenge, and redemption. The character's journey was the driving force, and everything else, the historical settings, the action-packed gameplay, the sprawling open worlds, served to enhance and enrich that central narrative. But as the series evolved, so too did its approach to storytelling. The shift towards a more history-centric narrative in the newer titles brought with it a host of changes and challenges. What happens when the protagonist takes a back seat to the broader historical themes and events? That transition from character-driven to history-centric storytelling didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual shift, with games like Assassin's Creed Unity and Syndicate serving as pivotal stepping stones. These titles began to place a greater emphasis on the historical setting, using the French Revolution and Victorian London as more than just backdrops for the protagonist's journey. But it was with the release of Assassin's Creed Origins that this new approach to storytelling truly came into its own. Set in the waning years of Ptolemaic Egypt, Origins plunged players into a meticulously recreated world filled with historical figures, cultural traditions, and political intrigue. The protagonist, Bayek, was certainly a compelling character in his own right, driven by a personal quest for vengeance. But his story often took a backseat to the broader historical narrative unfolding around him. The same can be said for Cassandra or Alexios in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. While players could shape the protagonist's personality through dialogue choices, their overarching journey was intrinsically tied to the historical setting of ancient Greece. The Peloponnesian War, the mythological elements, the philosophical debates, these were the driving forces of the narrative, with the protagonist serving as a vessel to explore these themes. This trend reached its apex in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where the Viking Age setting was the undisputed star of the show. Eivor's personal journey, while still important, often felt secondary to the larger historical events unfolding, such as the Viking invasions of England and the political machinations of figures like King Alfred. The game's sprawling open world was filled to the brim with historical details, from the intricacies of Norse mythology to the daily life in Anglo-Saxon settlements. But what does this shift mean for the player's emotional investment in the story? When the protagonist's personal journey takes a backseat to the historical setting, does it diminish the emotional impact of the narrative? It's a question worth considering, especially for longtime fans of the series who fell in love with the deeply personal stories of Ezio and Altair. There's no denying that the newer, history-centric Assassin's Creed games offer an unparalleled level of immersion into the past. The attention to historical detail is staggering, and the opportunity to explore these richly realized worlds is a major draw for many players. But it's also true that the emotional stakes can feel lower when the protagonist's personal journey is less of a focus. In the end, it comes down to a matter of preference. Some players will relish the opportunity to dive deep into a historical setting, to explore the political, cultural, and philosophical themes of the era. Others will yearn for the character-driven narratives of the earlier games, where the protagonist's emotional journey was the beating heart of the story. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's fascinating to examine how this shift in narrative focus has shaped the Assassin's Creed series over the years. As we've seen, this transition has sparked diverse reactions among the fan base, but what are the specific strengths and weaknesses of each approach? Character-driven to history-centric storytelling. It's a complex issue, with valid arguments on both sides. On one hand, the newer games offer an unparalleled level of historical immersion. When you play Assassin's Creed Origins, you're not just exploring a virtual recreation of Ptolemaic Egypt, you're living and breathing in it. The attention to detail is staggering, from the intricate hieroglyphs on the walls of the pyramids to the daily routines of the NPCs in the bustling cities of Alexandria and Memphis. This focus on historical authenticity allows for a much broader exploration of the themes, cultures, and philosophies of the era. But at what cost does this immersion come? Some would argue that the emotional stakes are lower when the protagonist's personal journey takes a backseat. In the early games, we were deeply invested in Ezio's quest for vengeance, in Altair's struggle for redemption. Their stories were the beating heart of the narrative, and everything else, the historical settings, the action-packed gameplay, served to enrich and enhance that emotional core. When the focus shifts to the broader historical context, it can be harder to form that deep, personal connection with the protagonist. Of course, this isn't a black and white issue. The newer games still feature compelling characters with their own struggles and motivations. Bayek's grief over his son's death in Origins, Cassandra's complex familial relationships in Odyssey, these are powerful emotional hooks that keep us invested in their stories. But there's no denying that these personal arcs are often overshadowed by the sweeping historical narratives unfolding around them. So, where does that leave us as fans of the series? Well, it depends on what you're looking for in an Assassin's Creed game. If you're a history buff who relishes the opportunity to explore meticulously recreated historical settings, then the newer titles are a dream come true. The sheer scope and detail of these worlds is breathtaking, and the chance to interact with famous historical figures and shape pivotal events is undeniably thrilling. But if you're someone who fell in love with the series for its deeply personal, character-driven narratives, then you might find yourself yearning for the days of Ezio and Altair. There's a certain emotional resonance that comes from focusing on a single character's journey, from watching them grow and change over the course of the story. It's a different kind of immersion, one that pulls you into the protagonist's mind and heart rather than just their historical surroundings. Ultimately, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's a matter of personal preference, of what you value most in a narrative experience. Some fans will embrace the shift towards historical authenticity, while others will lament the loss of those intimate, character-focused stories. The beauty of the Assassin's Creed series is that it's evolved and changed over time, offering different experiences for different players. Whether you're a die-hard fan of the early games or a convert to the newer, history-centric approach, there's no denying the impact that this franchise has had on the gaming landscape. But this begs the question, where does the series go from here? With the upcoming releases of Assassin's Creed Shadow and Infinity, Ubisoft has a chance to steer the narrative ship in a new direction once again. Will they double down on the history-focused approach, or will they find a way to strike a balance between historical authenticity and character-driven storytelling? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain, the Assassin's Creed series will continue to evolve and adapt, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in historical action-adventure games. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and keep questioning everything.